right, now for the man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give one anyway. He has built an independent media platform that has inspired millions. He has devoted his life to fighting for justice. He works tirelessly for human rights. He is relentless. He is a fighter. He insists on policy over party, people over profit, and planet over politics. His wife is a saint. His children are ridiculously adorable. And he has called on all of us today to stand with him and show the Democratic Party what it looks like to fight. Show the Democratic Party what it looks like to unite and what it looks like to resist. You are the revolution. We are the revolution. And now, here to talk with you today about how we can learn from our experiences in 2016 and prepare for 2020, please welcome Cenk Uygur.
So it's just wonderful to see you guys here. I've had folks tell me that this is the largest crowd in Des Moines, Iowa today with all of the different presidential candidates running around. You're still the biggest crowd here. The speech and the rally here today is called Revolution Rally, and there's a reason for that, because there's a revolution going on in this country. And it's a progressive revolution, and it has been putting forward amazing people, and a lot of you got those folks elected. Now, we can begin the fiery part of the speech. Because now I'm going to talk about our opponents and what we're going to do about it. So, unfortunately, we do have a lot of opponents. So, we've got the Republicans, of course. But we also have the corporate Democrats. And of course, and this is unfortunate, and I wish it weren't the case, but it's true, the mainstream media. But let's talk about the things that unfortunately are not as obvious to everyone else in the country, and it's partly because of the media blockade. So they say, well, if we just get rid of Trump, then everything would be great. But as Naomi Klein said on the Young Turks, if we get rid of Trump, we go back to a situation that was so bad that it created Trump. And so that is not going to work for any of us. So what the mainstream media doesn't understand, and a lot of the corporate Democrats, Pelosi, Schumer, and all the rest of them, is that wages have not gone up in 40 years. Adjusted for inflation, they have not gone up at all. Your productivity as Americans has gone up substantially. You've done a wonderful job. You're working so hard, and now most families have two people working at them, working overtime, and you still can't get your wages to go up. And people keep scratching their heads like, oh, gee, I wonder why that's the case. The Federal Reserve just came out and said, well, you know, we've got almost full employment, and we just gave $2 trillion in taxes to corporations, so it's weird that wages aren't going up. No, it's not weird. It's because of corporate control. They've taken over the government completely. And yet, is anyone talking about that in the media? Are they saying, oh my God, we're in an emergency, my God? Do you know that if you take the difference between your productivity over the last 40 years and the wages that you have, so productivity is sky high and the wages have flatlined. The difference between those two curves, according to the economists, have cost the average American worker, and this is a stunning fact, $17,000 a year every year. So if your wages had kept up with your productivity and how hard you're working in America, you'd all make $17,000 more per year on average. That's amazing. That's an emergency. That's a dire situation. That's why we got Trump, because as a voter in Western Virginia told one of our reporters during the 2016 election, he said he at least had the decency to lie to us. And he said things were going to get better. He said we were going to get higher wages. What do the corporate Democrats always tell you? No. Status quo is wonderful. Let's do a middle ground approach. So we are not in the business of the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. And this rally is all about the fierce urgency of now. Why would we be biased in favor of Bernie Sanders? Now, here's a guy who's 77 years old, barely combs his hair, and somehow they think that all of us, irrationally, out of nowhere, decided, yeah, let's go with that guy, right? What? Thank you. The policies. The policies. That's why we like him. That's why we like Elizabeth Warren, is policy after policy after policy, right? They got 1,000 negative articles about Bernie Sanders, and they got 1,000 anchors speaking against Bernie Sanders on TV 24/7. And they keep scratching their heads going, I don't know why anybody likes him. Then ask somebody, right? We got a room full of people here. Just pull one aside and ask them. And they're all going to tell you the same thing. Bernie Sanders is not our uncle. Elizabeth Warren's not our aunt. We're not related to them. We picked them not because we think they have a nice smile or they're likable. We picked them because they fight for us. All right, I'm going to break out the polls here because, they say, well, no, but guys, they're radical left. Bernie's radical left. All right, well, keep that thought in mind. Keep that thought in mind. Apparently, we're all radical left, right? Donald Trump and his team are not the only people doing alternative facts because the mainstream media also does alternative facts. So they say that we're radical left and that the country is center right. So I guess it's my turn to educate them. And when I say things like that, they say, oh my God, you progressives. Oh, you're always trying to beat us up and all this talk about like you're right. You guys don't understand. Everybody's playing three-dimensional chess in Washington. Yeah, how's that working out for us? Is part of the three-dimensional chess that your wages don't go up for 40 years? No, they're screwing us. They're absolutely positively screwing us, and I'll tell you how throughout the speech. But now, let's go to find out where the country is. Is it center right? Is it center left? Or maybe radical left? Let's find out. Turns out, I'm going to read you poll after poll here. 70% of Americans support Medicare for all. Even 52% of Republicans support Medicare for all. So let me ask the media, is 70% of the country radical left? Because if they are, great. So when you say, Bernie Sanders, he's radical left, only 70% of the country agrees with him. Do you say that? No, you don't. You lie. You say that he's fringe, when in reality, 70% of the country agrees with him. That's not anywhere near the last poll. By the way, whenever they find a poll that they like, they say, oh my God, Joe Biden's leading. That's a great poll. That's a great poll. Don't ever question that poll. Okay, fine, no problem. I like polls. You say, hey, Medicare for all polls are 70%. No, did that poll? No, that poll can't be true. That poll can't be true, right? Because no one I know likes Medicare for all. All the millionaires I know don't like it. Okay, so what do? They commission a new poll. And if you don't know this in politics, these are called push polls. When you're trying to do propaganda, and you disguise it in the form of a poll. So then they said, okay, now would you be in favor of Medicare for all if we told you it's going to take your private insurance away from you? Now, what they didn't say in the poll is, it would replace it with better insurance. Now, that's a push poll. That is a purposely misleading poll. And everybody in the press is like, nope. I've got a new poll where we lied to them and pretended that you were going to lose your private insurance, and we didn't tell them that you were going to get better insurance in the meanwhile. All of a sudden, you don't like polls, and you want to mislead people. And then you wonder why we think you have a bias. We don't have a bias. We have a perspective. We say, yes, we're progressive, and we're proud, right? That's why the Young Turks calls itself the home of progressives. We never hide that, but we don't play around with the facts. But the establishment media plays around with the facts all the time. If they get a poll that actually helps the American people, they say, nope, I don't believe it. I'm going to do a push poll instead. That is purposely misleading. That is establishment bias 101. All right. How about Green New Deal? Before they said whether it was a Republican, or a Democratic proposal, it polled at over 80%. Including 64% of Republicans wanted it. So is 80% of the country radical left? Is 64% of Republicans radical left? So can you begin to see the lies? So I'm going to keep going because I got a lot of these. 82% of Americans think wealthy people have too much power and influence in Washington. 69% think large businesses have too much. When do you hear that on TV? You never hear that. So is 82% of the country radical left? 59% of Americans and 43% of Republicans think corporations make too much profit. If Bernie Sanders doesn't even say this, if Bernie Sanders said 59% of corporations make too much profit, they'd go nuts. They'd say, oh my God, the socialist, Marxist, communist Venezuelan says that corporations make too much profit. What does that mean, too much profit? They're going to take our beloved corporations' profit away. 59% of the country agrees with that. So is 59% of the country what the media would call radical left? If that's true, that's wonderful. Then tell the American people you are radical left. Every one of these is backed up. Reuters Ipsos poll, and I can give you the polling on every single one of these. 76% of Americans believe the wealthiest Americans should pay higher taxes. Higher taxes. Now, guys, think about that. We got a country where 3/4 of the American people say, for God's sake, raise taxes on the rich. And what do? Instead? They do that exact opposite. Exact opposite. They cut taxes on the rich. Does that look like a democracy to you? No, they're robbing us. They're absolutely, positively robbing us. And what does the mainstream media do? Yes, sir, absolutely, sir. Did they ever once ask, how are you going to pay for that? $2 trillion to the rich and to multinational corporations. And they never asked, how are you going to pay for that? They never said, hey, wait a minute. This is way outside the mainstream of Americans. 3/4 of Americans think not only that you shouldn't cut taxes, that you should raise taxes on the rich. They never said that. And then they turn around and when we point that out, they act all aggrieved. Oh my God, you progressives. Oh, you're pressuring us too much. You know what we're going to do? We're going to shut out your message. Yeah, I know you've been doing that anyway. It's not like that's anything new. So 87% of Americans want to preserve Social Security for future generations, even if it means increasing taxes paid by wealthier Americans. You know what they say to that? They say, oh, that's populism. That would be doing what the American people want. Yeah, that's called a democracy. If 87% of Americans want something in a so-called democracy, you should think about giving it to them. But when any politician says, I'm going to do that, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, or otherwise, what do they say? Radicals! Radicals! They believe what 87% of the country believes. No, guys, you have to understand something, because they're doing mass brainwashing. And it's almost a form of torture, where they keep telling you things that are not true are true. And they keep telling you you're the crazy ones. They tell 87% of the country, no, you're crazy. Well, your position is illegitimate. Your position is radical. Your position is fringe. Your position is populist. And it's unacceptable and undoable. Whenever they want to spend money on the rich, though, all of a sudden, very doable. Very, very doable. So 78% of voters say they would favor a comprehensive 12-week national paid family and medical leave law, including 66% of Republicans. And we don't have it. 67% of Americans think same-sex marriage are legally valid, including 44% of Republicans. We just had Pride Day here in Iowa. %89 of voters support making quality early education for children from birth through age 5, including child care, more affordable. 82% of Republicans agree. Do we have quality early education from birth to age 5? No. 89% is not good enough in a democracy. Why? Because the donors own them. They own them. You know, there's a word for that when a donor comes and gives you a check, and then you do what they tell you. See, you guys are better journalists than everyone else on TV. Everybody knows that's called a bribe. That's called a bribe. Call it what it is. That's called corruption. Call it what it is. Bill Clinton, in his first presidential run, had a sign up on this wall, and to focus all of his campaign, and it was supposed to synthesize what they should focus on. And it just said, it's the economy, stupid, right? Now, the sign should say, it's the corruption, stupid. I can't believe that it doesn't occur to the media that 89% of Americans wanting something and them not getting it is problematic. They're like, oh, that's great, status quo is wonderful, you don't get anything you want. All right, we're gonna keep going. Look at this. Speaking of corruption, 78% of Americans believe the world's climate is undergoing a change that is causing more extreme weather patterns and sea levels rise, including 64% of Republicans. So, are we doing anything about that? Nope. Why? Because ExxonMobil is cutting a check to all the congressmen and all the senators. And then the media pretends, oh, the honorable gentleman from Kentucky and the honorable gentleman from Connecticut, they don't agree. No, there's no agreeing or not agreeing. They get a check and they do it as they are told. When you have, in a democracy, if you actually wanted voters, you would do what 78% of voters want. But they don't do that because they work for ExxonMobil and they don't work for us. I'm not anywhere near done. 57% of Americans believe police officers generally treat blacks and other minorities different than they treat whites. Yet Fox News starts a false debate about whether Black Lives Matter are the radicals, and they even call them terrorists, right? And if so, the rest of the media goes along with it. Instead of trying to figure out how do we stop our police, who are supposed to serve and protect us, from killing innocent, unarmed black men, instead of having that conversation and that debate, we turn around and have a debate about whether Black Lives Matter chanted the wrong thing. That's insanity. That's insanity. Are you ever going to listen to the American people? So, 68% of Americans believe that the country's openness, now, you want to talk about immigration, right? They say, well, immigration, the country's very against immigration. That's why Donald Trump won. Have you ever read a goddamn poll? 68% of Americans, including 48% of Republicans, believe the country's openness to people from around the world is, quote, essential to who we are as a nation. Just 29% say that if America is too open to people from all over the world, we risk losing our identity as a nation. That is Donald Trump's position, that is Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingram's position. And it is deeply, deeply unpopular. But what do you hear in the media? It makes it sound like, well, the country's against immigrants, what are we gonna do? We gotta do something, right? No, the country's massively in favor of immigrants. I can go on, I got more polls on immigrants, but you get the point. I wanna move on to, I gotta give you this one on Dreamers. 76% of registered voters, including 69% of Republicans, support allowing undocumented immigrants brought to the country as children, dreamers, to stay in the country, okay? Corporate Democrats, what are you doing? That's 3/4 of the country. Nancy Pelosi tells me that she's a master legislator. Hey, master legislator, 76% of the country, including 7 out of 10 Republicans, say the dreamers should be allowed to stay. And you can't get it passed? And you can't get it passed. That's so sad. And okay, now they finally put together a package and got it passed in the House after all these years, all these years. Then they go over to the Senate, and of course, what the Democrats immediately do? Preemptive surrender. Oh, well, the Republicans control the Senate, I guess we're gonna give up. No, then you go on TV and you say, God damn it, the Republicans are against 3/4 of Americans and even 70% of their own voters. Why does Mitch McConnell hate his own voters? It's called fighting. You fight, you fight, you fight. If you fight, you win. We have the whole country behind us. They're getting rid of abortion all throughout the country, in Alabama and Ohio and all these different states, right? Missouri, absolutely. 71% of Americans, including 50% of Republicans, oppose overturning Roe versus Wade. There it is again. You see the same number over and over and over again. At least 70% of the country, 7 out of 10 people are on our side, yet we keep losing. Why? Because of the corruption, and then the media saying, nope, it's a center-right country. Look at all these numbers. Which journalist would look at all these numbers and then declare that the country is center-right? Where does the money in corruption go? So they pour all the money to the politicians in campaign donations and independent expenditures. Last cycle, I think they spent at least $6 billion. You know where the great majority of that went? TV advertising. And then all of a sudden, TV says, what corruption? I don't see any corruption. No, I don't see it. What progressives? I don't see any progressives. I'm not going to put any progressives on air. I'm not going to let you defend yourself. I'm going to have every one of my anchors go and say that Bernie's a radical, that progressives are radicals. I'm going to pretend the country's not on the left. I'm going to pretend it's on the right. You know that 97% of Americans want federal background checks on guns? By the way, including 77% of gun owners, okay? Now I'm going to criticize some of my colleagues on the left and progressive groups. Guys, I love you, but you're misunderstanding politics. They keep talking about persuasion. What difference would it make if we had 98% of the country rather than 97% of the country? It isn't about persuasion. It's about the corruption. And so the 97%, we got it. We got it. In no sane democracy would you not be able to pass a law that 97% of Americans agree with. The only reason we can't pass it is because all the Republican legislators are taking a check from the NRA. And so the problem isn't persuasion, the problem is bribery. So I'm going to give you one last poll here, and that is, do you think money in politics is causing the dysfunction in our political system? Well, you know, I don't know if we have the whole country on our side on that one, because only 96% said yes. Well, by the way, to be fair, I don't know if we got the whole Republican Party on our side, because you know Nancy Pelosi always loves to ask permission from the Republicans before she does anything. So, Speaker Pelosi, I got great news for you. You have permission. 96% of Republicans also agree. Okay. The media gets mad at me when I criticize them. 96% of Americans believe that corruption is the #1 problem, and you guys never talk about it. And by the way, it's not just the cable news guys. Washington Post, New York Times. New York Times loves talking about the right wing. Oh, they're so intellectual, and they've got nerd avant-garde, or whatever the hell they call it, and they legitimize and platform all these monstrous right-wingers. Almost no articles ever about progressives, almost never a positive article about any progressive candidate, and then when they're discussing politics, apparently no one on staff understands politics because they're like, well, Orrin Hatch thinks this, and Mitt Romney now replaced him, and he thinks that, and then Mitch McConnell thinks. They don't think anything. They get a check, and they do as they are told, and the whole country believes it. The only people left not believing it is the media. So what do they focus on instead? They say, well, the reason Joe Biden's leading and why he's a good candidate is because he's likable. Well, I know you like him because you like the status quo, and he says, trust me, I ain't gonna do a goddamn thing for 4 years. So he's gonna maintain the status quo, and that's why you find him likable. I know he has a nice smile. Who cares? Who cares about his goddamn smile? Are you kidding me? Our lives are on the line. If you got a kid who is sick and you don't have insurance, if he has cancer, we as a society have decided we're going to let him die. Isn't that unbelievable? Over 30 million people in this country don't have health insurance. If their kid sprains their ankle, yeah, you can take them to the emergency room. But if they have cancer, the emergency room isn't going to help them. And as a society, we've become so monstrous that we say, let him die. And then the media tells me about Joe Biden's goddamn smile? That's your political analysis? And then you wonder why we're frustrated with you. So, look, here's what Joe Biden did. He voted for the Iraq War, and that killed nearly 1 million innocent Iraqis, let alone all of our boys that we sent over there that died. Thousands of Americans died, tens of thousands got injured. We wasted trillions of dollars there. Did you find that likable? No. I didn't find it likable either. The 94 crime bill that he said he was so proud to support, that led to the unjust imprisonment of millions of Americans. Did you find that likable? No. He says, well, look, I've been working with the Republicans on the Hyde Amendment, and I think that it's a good idea, and so what does that do? That denies poor and middle-class women the same reproductive rights as wealthy women. Do you find that likable? No. And then when he sees, oh, I'm going to lose some, you know why he changed his mind? Again, TV never talks about it. You know why he changed his mind? He got calls from donors. And they said, hey, wait a minute. I don't like the Hyde Amendment. And all of a sudden, Joe comes out the next day, and for political expediency, he changes his position on the Hyde Amendment. Do you find that likable? No. And when he does that, he says, no, it's okay. Now I'm on the right side of the issue. Do you believe him? No. Do you think when he goes into office that he isn't going to immediately brag about how he compromised with Mitch McConnell and kept the Hyde Amendment? You know he's going to do that. Everybody knows that. The media knows that. Joe Biden knows that, but they keep on lying to you. And speaking of which, Joe Biden keeps talking about how proud he is to work with other Republicans, including, and he said this, Dick Cheney. Do you find that likable? The media says Bernie is unlikable. I think when you have 3/4 of the country agreeing with you, you might be likable. So when progressives talk about Green New Deal or Medicare for all or college for all, any of those topics, you know what the media says in unison. How are you going to pay for that, right? So interesting question, and they think they're so sophisticated when they think, oh, did you know that you have to actually pay for it? Ooh, that's some three-dimensional chess going on there. I didn't see that coming. They treat us like children, nonstop patronizing towards progressives. Okay, then let me return the favor. So when they pass $2 trillion in tax cuts, did you ever ask, how are you going to pay for that? No, you never asked that. Wait, I thought you were sophisticated. And so now that costs us $2 trillion. They said it was going to increase wages. Has it increased wages? No. Not 1 cent. Adjusted for inflation, wages have not gone up. So what did the corporations do? What they always do. They maximize profit. They have to. By law, they have to maximize profit. So they took all of the proceeds. They took all of it, right? But the very sophisticated anchors on TV, the very sophisticated reporters at the New York Times go, oh, golly gee, that's normal. That's normal. But if you dare try to help any average American, how are you going to pay for that, right? So I have an idea. When we get in office, how about that $2 trillion that you gave away and got nothing for? How about we take it back? Yeah. They go, wait a minute, that's my precious tax cuts? Tell everyone we own that they are to fight against that tooth and nail. But we gave you the $2 trillion and we got nothing in return. Hey, where do we go to get our $5 trillion back for the Iraq and Afghanistan wars? $5 trillion, where do we go to get that back? Now, so unfortunately, we can't get that back. But I do want to ask the media, college for all that you say is unaffordable. Do you know what percentage, and I'd love to quiz them on the spot, but they'd say it's a gotcha question. What percentage of the Iraq war is college for all? So you tell me college for all, we can't afford it. So it must be twice as large as the cost of the Iraq War, maybe 10 times as large as the cost of the Iraq War, because we can't afford it and we afforded the Iraq War, right? No, it's 5% of the cost of the Iraq War, just 5%. But we can't afford the American dream for our kids and for your kids, but we can afford spending 20 times that for a senseless war that only Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Boeing and the oil companies profited from. It is sick. It is absolutely sick.